All right, Parshas Chayei discusses many topics, but I think the central focus of Parshas Chayei, even though the beginning discusses the death of Sarah, but is the finding of a wife for Yitzchak. And Avram is very careful who he chooses to be the middle person. Perhaps there's a lesson in that perhaps people have to be careful not only who they marry, but who their shadchan is. But in addition, the Torah tells us about Eliezer. Eliezer was, it says, Avram Zaken Ba Bayamim. Abraham was elderly with everything and coming in days. Vayomer Avram El Avdo Skan Beiso Hamoshel B'chol Asher Lo. So Avram says to the Skan Beiso, the elder of his household, who controlled everything, that was in charge of everything in his household. And it's pointed out by many that there is a difference between the way Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, is characterized here, and the way he's characterized in Parshas Lech Lecha. In Parshas Lech Lecha, Avram says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "Ma titein li," because God told Avram, "Skarcha harbe mod," you'll have a great reward. So Avram said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "What can you give me, seeing that I go childless, and the steward of my house is Eliezer?" Is Eliezer. So, and here all of a sudden, so he was in charge of the house. He was Moshe. He was in charge of everything in the house, but now he becomes Skan Beisa. Okay, we could say there was a passage of time, and in the passage of time, he got older. He was the eldest among this, became the eldest among the servants of Eliezer. But it seems that it's more than just that. And apparently, that in a sense, the idea of Skan Beiso here is that it's focusing on the experience that Eliezer had. Sometimes you have people who are capable, that do a very good job, but they're limited because they lack experience. And sometimes the experience, what we learn from experience, is more important than skills. Now, there's no doubt that Eliezer had great skills. But I think the Torah here is emphasizing a very important point. Now, the Medrash Rabbah in this week's Sedra, when it talks about the whole episode of Eliezer with Psuel and with Lavan and with the mother of Rivka, and certainly with Rivka, The Torah goes into great detail, not just once, but twice. After the Torah tells us all the events that happened, the Torah tells us how Eliezer repeated to Psuel, to Lavan, the base Psuel, to the house of Psuel, everything that took place. And the Torah tells us, the Medrash tells us, there are certain things, halachos, many halachos, that are learned from an extra letter in the Torah. In the Torah Shebechsav, the Torah is very selfish in revealing things. And perhaps this was necessary to make us aware, to stress the importance of Torah Sheba'al Peh. If everything had been written down, there wouldn't be a necessity of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And in the past, I've discussed very much the idea expressed by the Beis Halevi. Beis Halevi discusses a medrash that says that if the Jewish people had not made an Egel Hazav, there had not been a golden calf, then there would not have been a need for a Torah Sheba'al Peh. But it's because the Jewish people made the Egel Hazav that it became necessary to have an Egel, to have a Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the question is, how is it possible to, does that mean that we would, if the Jewish people did not sin with Egel Hazav, so we would have said, Ayin Tachas Ayin Mamish. We would have, the halacha would have been Chas v'Shalom, that if somebody damages the eye of a person, he takes out someone's eye, or he destroys the limb of a person, that we do ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye, a hand for a hand, in the literal sense. Chas v'shalom, that such a thought should be possible. It's possible that maybe that's a law that the Torah prescribes as a possibility for the Umos Olam. We know that there are certain nations, certain people that have these type of laws. But certainly for Klal Yisrael, from the perspective of the Torah, there is no basis for such a thing. But that was not revealed in the Torah Shebechsav, in the written Torah. All that was revealed in the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So how is it possible to imagine that if the Jewish people adhered to the word of God, when Moshe Rabbeinu went on top of the mountain, that there would not have been a Torah Sheba'al Peh? There would not have been an oral law. It's inconceivable that we should have a Torah Sheb'chsav without a Torah Sheb'al Peh. And what I think is, actually the Beis Halevi says that it doesn't mean chas v'shalom, that the laws of the Torah Sheb'al Peh would not have been effective, would not have been a requirement if the Jewish people had not made the golden calf. But the laws, what it means is that many of the laws of the Torah Sheb'al Peh, of the oral tradition, would have been included in the Torah Sheb'chsav, would have been included in the written Torah. But it's because the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf that many halachas were only transmitted through the oral Torah. Now we have to understand, why is it that way? But it's obvious, and it seems that this is the idea that the Beis Halevi meant also. That what did the golden calf demonstrate? The Jewish people at the time of Matan Torah, they said Na'aseh v'nishma. As our sages say, and I've always repeated that time and time again, that at that point they were on a level higher than Malachim. But 40 days later, they stood in front of a golden calf and said, Elu Elohecha Yisrael. What did that demonstrate? That demonstrated what happened during those 40 days. During those 40 days, Moshe Rabbeinu was not there with them. When their Rabbi, their teacher, the ultimate teacher of Klal Yisrael, was gone for 40 days. So even after just recently having said Na'aseh v'nishma, committing themselves to the Torah, we will do and we will listen. And committing themselves to do even before listening, committing themselves to listen. They were able to stand in front of a golden calf and say, Elu Elohecha Yisrael. That demonstrated the need for a Rebbe. A Torah Sheb'chsav, a written Torah. You take out the Sefer and you read it. A person could think, I don't need a Rebbe for that. I can do it myself. So therefore, parts of the oral Torah we're not including the Torah Sheb'chsav in order to necessitate the relationship between a Rebbe and a Talmud, between a teacher and a student, in order to necessitate the understanding of the concept of Masorah, of the linkage to Har Sinai, from generation to generation. And I think that perhaps there is an additional reason for it. And perhaps there are things that cannot be conveyed with Gzeres HaKosovs. There are things that can only be conveyed from generation to generation from teacher to student, from the relationship that exists between one generation and the other. And when one cuts themselves off from the previous generations, especially when it comes to personality traits, there can't be a real transmission. You can have all the musa shmuzin. When it comes to personality traits, you can talk about chesed all you want. You can talk about being merciful all you want. But it cannot be successfully transmitted. Certain things need an example. And we see that in last week's Sedra. In last week's Sedra, the Torah tells us about Avram sitting outside his tent. And as I mentioned, the Askenu Baal Tosfos said that Avram couldn't eat until he was able to share his meal with somebody. And he was waiting to see stragglers. And when we speak of stragglers, we're talking not about Jews who walked in the desert in the time of Avraham Avinu. We could best identify them as Arabs, whether they were the descendants of Yishmael, associates of Yishmael, or just people who were identified as desert dwellers or travelers, is irrelevant. But for Avram, that was chesed. That was Gemilus Chasadim. Avram Yoshe Pesach Ha'oel, he's sitting at the door of his tent. And as the Karbaneda in his Parish and Yerushalmi Gittin tells us that even in regard to Goyim, even in regard to non-Jews, there is a mitzvah of showing Rachmanus, of showing Chesed, on the basis of a halachta b'drachav. And he based it on the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim, Rachamav al kol ma'asav. The Rambam says that we have to show Chesed, we have to show Rachmim, not just because of Darkei Shalom, but there are situations where V'halachta b'drachav applies to non-Jews. And sometimes even to non-Jews who are not completely observant in the Shiva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. That applies to them on the basis of a halachta b'drachav. Mahu chanun afata yehi chanun, mahu rachum afata yehi rachum. Mahu erech hapayim afata yehi erech hapayim. And so the Rambam, so the Karbaneda saying this in the Rambam, so Abraham was standing outside Why does the Torah go into the detail of what happened? In other words, we have to learn from the example of Avraham. And even when Avraham, the Torah tells us that God said, should I hide from Avraham what my plans are to destroy stone? But Avraham, Avraham is going to be a great nation. Therefore, I have to reveal to Avraham my plans of destroying stone. Question is, does this make sense? That because Avraham is going to be a great nation, I have to reveal to Avraham my plans of destroying stone. How are we to understand it? But the Torah is not a book, it's not a biography that tells us the stories or the biography of the Avos. And the Zohar very much emphasizes that point. The Torah says these stories are Torah. And if these stories are Torah, these events that took place are Torah, they are revealed to us in order that we should learn from them. And even according to what the Rambam says, that some of these stories, some of these events that happened was in a dream. The three Malachim coming to Avram. Most Rishonim disagree with the Rambam. But nevertheless, the Torah reveals this to us because we have to learn from it. It's an example. The dream is a revelation of halacha. But sometimes the revelation of halacha cannot be given over in words of do and don't, but it has to be revealed in an example. And it's interesting, but I once heard from my father Zatzal, not to answer this question, but Torah tells us in Vayera, when God mentions Hamachasani mi Abraham, can I hide or should I hide what I'm planned to do in stone from Abraham? When Abraham Abraham will be a great nation. V'nivrachu kol goyei aretz, and all the nations of the world will be blessed through him and through his nation. Ki yadativ, because I love him. L'man ashi yitzaba es banav es beiso achrav, because he commands his children and his house hold after him. V'shamru derech Hashem laso staka mishpat, and they will watch over the path of God. V'halachta b'drachav, to do tzedakah, charity, and mishpat, and justice. L'man havi Hashem al Avram asher diber alav, in order that God should bring to Avram that which he said regarding him. So, what's the idea? He commands his children and his house after him. I mentioned many times, people used to write wills. And the wills were not just dividing up the possessions of the father, but he used to write ethical wills, advice, how to act. And very often they would start off, Laman ashi yitzava es banav es beiso achrav. He commands his children after him how they should act. even after he's gone. Very often, children are more careful when the parents are there. But when the parents are gone, many of the things they observed, many of the things they were careful about, became unimportant. So parents would reinforce, but this was especially true in personality traits. But my father explained the pasuk differently. He commands his children after him by his example. After him means by his example. There are many things that cannot be commanded orally alone. There has to be an example. And when there is an example, the impact and the impression will very often last acharav, even after, in the other sense, even after the parent is no longer there. So the Torah is telling us that when it comes to chesed, when it comes to gemilas chasadim, we have to learn from Avram, from Sarah. A matter of fact, as a matter of fact, the three traits of the descendants of Avram are Rachmanim, Baishanim, Gomlei Chasadim. Rachmanim, mercifulness. We see that in Parshas Chayei, when Avram pleads on behalf of the people of Sdom. Baishan means someone who's not interested in being the center of attention. Modesty. Vinay Sarah Ba'ohel. Sarah is in the tent. Gomlei Chasadim. Abraham waiting outside the tent for passerbys, not to be able to eat his meal. He had to share his meal. He didn't know that they were malachim. He thought they were three Arabs. And when is this mentioned? This is mentioned immediately after Avram goes through the bris milah. When Avram becomes a Jew, because just like the bris milah is the physical sign of a Jew, there are character signs of the Jew also. But what's interesting is that at least in two of these midos, in two of these traits, it has to do with chesed and gemilas, with mercy, and chesed and gemilas chasadim, with non-Jews. Avram thought that the malachim were sojourners, people traveling through the desert. They weren't from Beisal Shal Avram. They weren't from the house of Avram. Who were they? According to the Gemaras and to the Medrash, Avram thought they were idol worshippers. They seemed, from the words of Chazal, to worship the earth, the sand of the desert. And the people of Sdom certainly were not Jewish. And Avram is pleading with them. Why? because we have to learn from Abraham. But why is it what the Torah tells us about chesed to non-Jews, gemilas chasadim to non-Jews, immediately after the bris milah? And we were all shocked. And I've discussed it in the previous shiurim about these Jewish people. I mentioned that are protesting, if in fact they are Jewish, against the Jewish people for the Palestinians, for the murderers. And don't think they're fools that want to fool themselves. And there are those that consider themselves smart. And in fact, they're just sophisticated fools, not even sophisticated. They give the impression, they think they're giving the impression of being sophisticated. As I've discussed, where does it emanate from? And I mentioned in the share, they think that their Judaism emanates from their universalism. When Judaism emanates from universalism, so you can join the enemies of the Jewish people also. You can become the capos of this generation when you join the Nazis of this generation. You have to be stupid and dumb. And there are no shortages of people. Some, they're just naturally that way. Perhaps we can't blame them. But there's some that think it's sophisticated to be stupid. You see these Palestinians, and we're not talking about the Palestinians just in Palestine, who people, in trying to find excuses for them, say, oh, they were forced to demonstrate. They were forced to say this. When every poll shows that not only the Palestinians in Gaza were supporters of Hamas, but if there would be an election on the West Bank, they would also vote for Hamas. So let's make it clear. Hamas and Palestinians, it's all one group. They are the enablers. But the stupid people, and among them people who identify as being Jewish, they say, don't they watch? They watch TV. They see the news. They participate in the demonstrations that are in the news. And these Palestinians who live in the United States are going screaming from the sea to the river to the sea. What does that mean? These people don't think. And usually because they don't want to think. It means we got to get rid of the Jewish people from Israel. Throw them into the sea. They used to say it more literally. Now they gave the stupid people an ability to make believe they don't understand what is being said. It's a little too difficult for them to understand what those words mean. Well, that's not exactly what was said. And then they'll say, oh, they were probably scared that they have relatives in Palestine who are going to be killed. Like all these people marching with all kinds of things over their face. They're going to figure out who it was who didn't say it. They're all Hamas. There was a reason why the Torah said by Amalek that it's the whole nation of Amalek. Now, so we learn from the example, but so the Torah tells us we have to learn from the example of the Avos, and not just from the example of the Avos, but to learn from the example of the Avdei Avos. And among the Avdei Avos, who do we learn most from? Eliezer. Why? Eliezer Skan Beso. He is the elder of his house, the elder of Avram's house. He saw Avram. He saw Sarah. He saw how they acted in regard to their chesed, in regard to devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we learn more. The Torah had to put the way the Avdei Avos spoke, the servant of the Avos, the Skan Beso. And to a certain degree, when Avram picked Eliezer, perhaps Avram didn't just pick Eliezer for the mission, but to teach future generations many things about the way we have to act. And it's very interesting, and there's so much to talk about and so little time. But I think there was one point my father always used to mention, that there's a saying, and I know Lubavitch has the same saying. Of course, it's not the simple shot that you have to kvu item la Torah. This is the way the Lubavitchers say it. My father didn't say it that way. You have to set the times with the Torah. In other words, my father would say, sometimes, the problems of the day can find their attitude regarding them in the Sedra of the week. And we are in a time when there are a lot of problems. It's rare that the Jewish people should have had so many problems like we have today. And the Torah tells us that Eliezer at first thought that everything was taken care of. And the Suel and Lavan were ready to agree, and everything is settled. They made agreements, almost like the peace treaties of today. You remember those peace treaties? The ones that the buses were being bombed immediately afterwards? Remember those peace treaties that said that the PLO had to hand over those who do terrorism? Skor Yemo Solam. That's the idea of Skan Beso. We have to learn from our experience. Eliezer was chosen because he learned from his experience. He was the one who had the most experience in the Beis Avraham, how to act. And it's very interesting, the Torah tells us, but Yomer Achia V'ima, the Medrash says Psuel died, okay. They tried to kill Eliezer's host. The Medrash says, Teshev Enari Tanu Yomim. Yes, we promised you. But we want to delay it a little bit. We want to delay it. We don't want to do it right now. a pause. Let's stop for a moment. Yes, we agree to everything, but we want to just delay a little bit. Itana yomim or usar days, or maybe 10. And Rashi points out that they didn't literally say yomim; they meant months. So the question is, so why does it say yomim? I think we could suggest that they said yomim in a type of manner that could have been interpreted to mean months. Remember, they used to make the peace treaties in Arabic and in English and in Hebrew, and somehow there was something strange with the translation. And at times, at the last minute, Arafat Yamach Shemo would say, I want something changed immediately. At every moment, it was everything agreed upon. And what the idea, and why didn't Eliezer agree? Eliezer knew that they were trying to block the whole thing. This was an excuse. Sometimes, so first, they talk about a ceasefire at the same time that they're screaming from the sea to the river. But some people, they choose deafness of certain sentences and they hear the other sentences. And then they try to reword it. A pause. But we know what all that means. The idea of honesty, the concept of honesty has changed. Honesty doesn't no longer mean what we used to call the truth. Honesty means so long as I can interpret it in such a way that will be different than what you understand, that's still honest. And even where I can't interpret in such a way. That was yesterday and today is today. The past is irrelevant. We have to learn from history. And Avraham understood when you deal with a Lavan, you have to understand what is going on. You have to use your past experience. And Avram Avinu, he had to deal with everybody. And the one who recognized everything that Avram, the one who recognized it, was Eliezer, the Skan Beso. He had a lot of experience. And Eliezer, being the Skan Beso, he wasn't just in charge. He wasn't just the main person in Avram's house. He was Moshe. It was at a certain point where Avram could trust him. You can't make a deal. You can't make an agreement with people who time and time again have not kept their side of the agreement. You have to learn from the past. And people who can just change the words, you can't trust them either. So first it's a ceasefire, and then it's a pause. Who is fooling who? And who wants to be fooled? It comes a time after that we should learn from our experience. Who wants to assume responsibility? Everybody's talking about the responsibility that took place on Simchas Torah. I want to know who is going to assume responsibility for all the future pogroms, and that's the word for it, that are going to take place in the future. Which Jewish senators and congressmen are going to assume that responsibility? Yes, it's important to find out whether there was somebody who did not convey the information he should have conveyed. But more important is using the past for the future and to make sure that mistakes are not repeated. And you have to be really stupid. And there's no shortage of that. When they're coming and singing, we want a ceasefire. And at the same time, they say, from the sea to the river, we don't want a state of Israel. They interviewed all these Palestinians on TV, asking them, what do you think about there being a state of Israel? No, there shouldn't be a state of Israel. That will not do. But the sophisticated fools and stupid, they don't hear. Oh, that's just this individual that was interviewed. Or he probably has a relative in Gaza who they're going to kill if he says that. We know. These are, as I mentioned, these are the people that cheered when they dragged the body of an Israeli woman, when she was carried in a very inappropriate manner, and they were throwing candies to her, on her, and they chopped off her head afterwards. So who are you going to trust? So you have to make believe that was in the past. That was yesterday. And there was a time we were stupid enough to believe that. But today, we don't even have that excuse. Today, they're singing today to get rid of all of Israel. So now, it's, in addition to being stupid, these people have become deaf. Selective deafness. You know, sometimes the Rambam uses the expression shota together with Russia. And the question is, how is it possible to be both a shota and a Russia? And the answer is, sometimes our rishus manifests itself in our making ourselves a shota. We have to realize, to us, we'll say, they're crazy. They don't understand. It's all rishus. Being a shota emanates from rishus. They don't care. if it had been their business, if there had been a possibility they would lose a little money, they would be more careful. They wouldn't trust this person. You don't point as a Moshe, for a person in charge of your economics and your finance. Somebody who time and time again proved themselves dishonest. But when it comes to the lives of Jewish people, there are those that are ready to go along and rely on them. What is the assurance that we have? There is none. And experience has showed us that all the commitments by them and by other nations were meaningless. We'll give back territory, and then they'll violate every commitment that they make. And they will attack us for not following the commitments, even though they did not keep their end of the bargain. What's unfortunate is, as a boy, I would hear the stories about World War II, how the American Jews did not use their abilities to help their brothers and sisters. And I heard the stories of those Jews who cooperated in Europe with the Nazis and would give over the names of the Jewish people. And it was with total disbelief. But it seems that, unfortunately, that Masorah, that tradition that was given over from generation to generation among some of the nations of the world, unfortunately seems to be given over by some Jews also. We thought that perhaps they didn't understand. But we see today their not understanding is a choice that they made not to understand. It is being a shota emanates from the rishis. So they're it's simple rishis on their part. They might try to give sophisticated arguments, but that's just a cover for their rishis. It's our responsibility to remain in contact with reality, not to act, not to make ourselves deaf to the cries of our brothers and sisters, and not to make ourselves deaf to the cries of the Palestinians who scream that they want to destroy the Jewish people, at the same time that they're talking about a pause or a small ceasefire for humanitarian efforts. We have to learn from the previous generations what happened. Unfortunately, there are many that are repeating the mistake of previous generations. We look forward to Yeshua from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to become the shlichim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in bringing about Yeshua and Hatzalah for Klal Yisrael.
If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. Chat working? Yeah.